Hello and welcome to the iChiefs podcast series, brought to you by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. This is where new ideas are born, leadership skills are discussed, and engaging topics are brought to the table. I'm Tom Jenkins, Fire Chief of the City of Rogers, Arkansas, and a past IAFC president.
And I'm Joe Powers, the Managing Director of IAFC's consulting firm, Emergency Services Consulting International. We're glad you're here. This podcast is designed for you and for the fire and emergency services community.
Before we dig into this week's important topic, make sure to check out our library of episodes at iafc.org/podcasts and listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you think the content is great, go ahead and share it with your crew. Welcome back for the second podcast of 2023. I'm Tom Jenkins, one of the co-hosts, joined with Joe Powers and our guest today, Eriks Gabliks, who is the superintendent of the National Fire Academy. Eriks, how long have you been at the NFA now?
2.5 years.
Well, tell us a little bit about that experience and what you bring to the National Fire Academy, coming from the state of Washington, if my memory serves me correctly, right?
Well, actually from Oregon, but that's okay. It's close. It's close, but it was an honor to join the team at the U.S. Fire Administration about 2.5 years ago as a superintendent. Obviously following two people that are well known to your audience, Chief Tanya Hoover, who formerly was the California State Fire Marshal, who was the superintendent, and then now is the U.S. Fire Administrator, Deputy U.S. Fire Administrator. And then previously to that, Dr. Dennis O'Neill, who was not only the superintendent, but also promoted up to be the Deputy U.S. Fire Administrator. So two people I respect very much, two people I work with hand in hand, really, as a state training director from Oregon for a number of years. But it was a great opportunity to join the team at the National Fire Academy, and really for a couple of reasons that I think a lot of your listeners will connect with. One is that I was my first exposure to the National Fire Academy was through a 2-day class held in New Jersey when I was a volunteer fire officer. So the National Fire Academy brings 9 2-day classes to every state. I went to one of those classes, and then they gave a flyer saying, you should come to the state weekend. So another person from a neighboring fire department said, we should go to the NFA. And I went to the state weekend, and I was hooked, because while the 2-day class I received off campus was fantastic, the experience on campus was unbelievable. And in part because of the campus, the structure, the history there. But the fact that I was really in a place where men and women from across the country come to receive professional development. So that kind of got me hooked in the NFA. I eventually took additional resident classes, 6-day, 2-week. Then I applied and was accepted into the executive fire officer, which I know is near and dear to both of you. And we're all alumni of that program. But, that was my professional development vehicle. So I enjoyed that. Finishing up EFO then gave me the impetus and finish my, not to finish, but to complete a master's degree program in public policy. So I did that to kind of continue to learn. And then I applied and was asked to be on the Board of Visitors for the National Fire Academy. So I did that for 4 years. So that is a White House appointment. And the Board of Visitors is very equivalent to what most people would think of like a Board of Trustees or a Board of Regents for a college. And even though the National Fire Academy isn't a college or an academic institution, we do have a lot of partnerships there. But the Congress established in the Fire Prevention and Control Act the Board of Visitors to be, if you will, the overseer of the National Fire Academy. So the Board of Visitors meets 3 times a year. One of those is in person on campus. And they really look at everything from stem to stern. So they're looking at not only the curriculum, they're looking at our evaluations from our students, and they're also looking at the campus and our budget. So they make recommendations to the U.S. Fire Administrator, the FEMA Administrator, that are public, and all of those are posted online about how the National Fire Academy is doing. So that's my exposure to the NFA. And then as a state training director, and I think this is a different piece that most people don't realize but the National Fire Academy has a partnership with the 50 state fire training systems across the country. So in essence, it's a conveyor belt of information to and from. So As a state training director in Oregon, my job was to make sure that the Oregon Fire Service Career Volunteer Combination knew about the work taking place at the NFA in Emmitsburg, but also bringing classes to Oregon. And then on the same token, letting the National Fire Academy know how they were doing and how they were reaching the students. So in Oregon, I had a fire service community of 13,000 plus or minus, of which 75% were volunteer. So, getting classes for people that were in career positions were just as important to getting classes to people that were volunteers and could only make a 2-day class. So a really good opportunity. So when the position applied, I was having a great time in Oregon, but I'd been with the state for 30 years, 10 as a director. I served under 3 governors. So I had a great time. I enjoyed the organization. I love the people. I love the mission. But the opportunity came up to put my name in for this. And, 9 months later, I got a call. Would you like to be the superintendent? And my wife and I said, yep, let's do it. So we packed everything we have, and my wife would identify that I have a lot of fire stuff. So that a lot of that came across country, but great opportunity to be in the role I'm in now, working for really the firefighters, the fire officers, and the fire service partners across the country from coast to coast.
Eriks, that's awesome. I think that, and maybe Tom already knew everything that you just said, but I didn't know half of the things that you said about the Board of Visitors and your background in the NFA. So that's amazing. I think that I know that I'm the youngest or the least senior EFO grad, among the 3 of us. And I came through EFO, partly under Chief Hoover, and, during our first year, we got an update around where EFO was going to go, and for us, we were the last cohort to make it through the 4 years. So, I would love to have a little an update around where the new EFO is going. I've heard some really great things, and where does that program where is that program going over the next few years, and how can people get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I appreciate your patience with us at the National Fire Academy, because you finished under unprecedented times. Not only were we in the middle of a pandemic, so we had to figure out how to get you and your cohort across the finish line, but we were also transitioning from the old curriculum to the new curriculum, right? So thank you and all your classmates for working with us and sticking with it. When I came to the NFA, we were in the middle of a transition of the Executive Fire Officer program. And I saw insight on that when I was in the Board of Visitors, because the staff reports out to the board on the projects. But the Executive Fire Officer, the historic or legacy model, as we call it, was 4 years, 4 applied research papers, and then you completed the program. So it was 2 weeks on campus of paper and then followed up times 4, right? So 4 total. But what we heard were 2 things. One is from the stakeholders, the students. 4 years was just too long. It seemed very drawn out. It was very hard for people to get away for 4 years knowing what their schedule is going to be, because we have both current and future leaders. As you know, both of you are also working while you're in the EFO program, so nothing at home stops. It's all on your desk or piling up in your emails. So the feedback was 4 years was too long. The other feedback we received was that the academic rigor should be higher. And what we heard from that is it should really be at the master's degree level. So we worked with our curriculum design team, with our stakeholders, and built, if you will, a new and improved Executive Fire Officer program. And not that there was anything wrong with the previous one. That had served us well. But it's much like a fire truck. After you drive it for 20 years, there's things that need to be updated. There are new things to be added. So we needed to kind of get a new EFO program, respect the old one. Obviously, those folks are working in the fire service. They're leaders from across the country doing great work, but we needed to refresh that. So we brought in our stakeholders, and the feedback we got was not only the academic rigor should be at the graduate level, which we worked on, but the other thing that we really should focus on, and this came from people that employ fire chiefs and fire service leaders, but that the program should be focused on the executive fire officer or the chief fire officer, and not the chief firefighter. And that's something I think people hear, and they try to understand what I'm saying when I do that, but it's not the person that leaves the council chambers when there's a fire call. While that's important in some communities, that is the officer in charge, and they have a small department they have to go. But it's that fire service leader that can sit in front of an elected group, it can sit in front of a community group and explain the needs of the fire rescue organization. So that could be human resource related, that could be contract related for bargaining units, that could be strategic planning, that could be where you're going to put your next fire station, that could be discussing a partnership. For example, we can look at the tragedies going across the country with active shooter incidents, right? An active shooter incident is a community incident. While fire EMS plays a key role, as does law enforcement, so does public works, so does transportation, so does school districts. So having that well-rounded person in the executive fire officer be able to do all of those things. So the pillars of the new EFO program focus on three very unique segments. The first one is self, having that leader understand who they are and how they think and how they react and how they take care of themselves. The second pillar is the organization that they are leading. So understanding the men and women that they work with, right, on a daily basis, whether it's career, volunteer, combination, how does that organization function? And what are the challenges and the opportunities within? What are the strengths? And then the third one is the community, which is how does the fire rescue organization and how does that leader engage with the community that they serve? So those are the three pillars that really built the new EFO program. We still include the Gettysburg staff ride. So that's part of the fourth element, if you will, because there are so many leadership lessons learned just up the road from our campus at the Gettysburg Military Park. So we did keep that piece, but really all the other elements are either updates or new to the previous program, really embracing those three pillars. The other thing that we're excited about because of the work of our staff is that the EFO program, our target was to get it recognized at the graduate level. We did submit the first three segments of the EFO program to American College of Education, which is a third-party review that we pay for to have come in and assess our programs. And we now have those first three classes recognized at the graduate level. So that's the added value for the people coming to EFO. Is that now they can leave EFO not only with a certificate in hand that they've completed a prestigious program, but also they can go down the street to their local college or university campus and say, I want to continue my professional development. Maybe I want to pursue a master's degree in public policy or a master's degree in fire administration, whatever. But then they can convert those credits. And again, not every college university recognizes it, but it gives them also that ability now to continue their professional development and seek a master's degree. So that's kind of a thumbnail, but we're really excited about where it's been. But we're also very aware that, there were bumps and bruises along the way because just like any time you change anything, and let's be honest, the fire service is very bound by tradition and culture. But when people heard the EFO program was changing, that was kind of the shot heard around the world. Like, what's wrong with the program? Why are you doing that? How dare you? And it wasn't, again, that there was anything wrong with the legacy executive fire officer program. It was just tired and needed a refresh. So what we wanted to do is kind of capture all the good things from the old EFO program, but infuse all the new things that our current leaders need to know. One of those, for example, is resilience. Resilience wasn't discussed in the old legacy EFO program. Now it's a very big part of our new understanding self, because if that leader doesn't understand who they are and doesn't understand how to take care of themselves, how do we expect them to take care of their organization or community? So that's why we start with that as the foundational pillar.
I'm just, I think I can speak on the behalf of Joe. I'm really glad that it got tougher after I got my certificate. So that was good timing on the part of DHS. So one of the things I noticed, everything you said about the assessment and improvements of EFO, I think resonates. So many of the people that I went through with, it's like they graduated and within years they were retired. And it also seems like something else that may be of interest to our listeners is what the NFA has to offer for chiefs. So like there's two elements, I guess, to my question that I would love to hear your response on. One is you get a chief like me. The last residency course I took was the 4th year of EFO. And even though I thought I would go back, now that's been 15 years ago, I guess, give or take. What else is there besides EFO that a chief officer might need to be aware of or a resource? And then the other part to that, Eriks, is what does a chief need to know today about the resources, the other curriculum opportunities with the NFA, so that we're sending our people there and using that treasure that sometimes I think gets a little overlooked?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it actually opens up a lot of things as we discuss this. But one is what I'll say to both of you, and I know you well enough that even though you're graduates of the EFO program and you haven't been back on campus since that, I know you're mentoring other people and encouraging them to come to the National Fire Academy, right? So there's different ways that we continue to give back. We also have a number of people that are EFO alumni that are instructors for us, both on and off campus. So there's different ways that we continue to serve, not just the NFA, right, but the American Fire Service, because, somewhere someone told us we should apply for this course, right? And we didn't think anything of it, and we did. And it's probably one of the best things we ever encountered. And as a result, we kept coming back, and now we're telling other people to come. So if you look at today's fire service, which is complex, if you look at people that are in a leadership role, as let's say the fire chief, the 5 bugle chief, we expect them to understand how to use and analyze data, but we also want them to be able to use that data to make it not complicated, so they can explain it to their city manager or their elected officials, to look at where fire stations should be placed, or should an additional ambulance be put into service, or maybe additional staffing. So we want to understand data. We also want that person to understand finances and budgeting. We also want them to understand community risk reduction. So as much as we spend time talking about responding to calls, and that's the sexy part, if you will, of the fire service is jumping on the engine or the rig and heading to a call and helping somebody in need. The other part is, how do we mitigate those incidents from not even happening, right? So if our community, if we understand how to use our fire data and look at our problems, and not just fire data, but response data, we may have an issue with multi-family housing units. We might have an issue with, abandoned vehicles. We may have an issue, and let's use a tragic example. We may have an issue in a community where children are drowning in pools, right? So through an analysis, we could do community risk reduction and say, what are the issues facing our community? How do we work with our partners to mitigate those so that we don't have to go to those tragic calls? So CRR is a big part of it. The same one, codes and standards. I think as you look across the landscape of the United States, as communities are having discussions about affordable housing, we want our fire service leaders to understand the fire service codes and standards that have been put in place to have safe housing. So there's not a town right now that's not looking at affordable housing. And I'm sure there's somebody sitting on the other side of the fire service saying, if we just lower the fire standards for this, these houses or these apartments will be a lot cheaper, right? So how do we not only have the awareness of that issue, but how do we have the ability to have that discussion with those elected officials to make that decision on what those codes and standards should be? The other one, we talk about taking care of our own, right? First level supervision, leadership type classes just for us. So even though EFO may not be for everyone, you can come and take a 1 week or a 2 week class on a leadership specific topic. We have one that's very popular called New Chief Officer. This is a person that's just been promoted to that 5 bugle or 4 bugle role that we go through. These are the things that you should expect now that you're in the role of the fire chief. So that's well received. We just piloted a new class called Special Operations Teams, which is that fire officer, even that team leader that you have assigned to develop a water rescue team, a hazmat team, a community risk reduction team, right? What does it take to have a team? It's not just going, and I'll use technical rescue. It's not just going to the fire expo and buying a bunch of rope and rappelling gear, right? It's the policies, the procedures, the risk, the expenses, the training, all those things that you and your role as the chief and that city manager is going to want to know, okay, now we have one of these. What's it going to take to maintain it? What's it going to cost? So we have that special operations program management class that's brand new. And then the other one that may not fit into leadership, but it does. But it's the incident management training that we offer, because we also are leaders on the fire ground. Even though in a lot of communities, the chief may not be the one responding to those day-to-day calls. In some communities, they are, right? They are also the chief. They may be also the response officer, depending on how big their staffing is or isn't, especially in a volunteer department. They may be that career person that's going out on every call and is the first one to get there to kind of spool it up and size it up. But in incident management, we have a lot of classes for that first level officer, that person looking to be an officer, so that they know how to properly manage an incident. A few weeks ago, I like to visit the classes and check in and visit the students and find out what's going on. And I talked to one of the students in the class that was a captain for 7 years. And I said, why did you want to come to this class? And he says, I had this class when I was promoted, but he says, I've never taken charge of an incident since I've been a captain because the battalion chief was always first one there. And my concern is, what if that battalion chief doesn't show up because I haven't run an incident? So they were back with us to basically do a refresh, which is great. But, the National Fire Academy has a lot of opportunities in all those different areas. And the key thing is it's free of charge. So our classes on campus, we don't charge for. The only expense for the participants is that they buy a meal ticket while they're on campus and they get to us, but we'll reimburse you for your travel. We'll provide lodging and we'll provide world-class training. The other thing, which is added value, is that you will be in a classroom with peers from across the country. So I know both of you, when you through executive fire officer, you were with people from other states and even other countries, depending on what's going on campus at that time. But what you find out is that while the fire rescue service is very similar, it's also very different. So each community's fire protection, each community's operations are very different based on what they are able to establish, what they're able to afford, what they've been able to implement, but also the changes that they're working through. So, what we're seeing in a lot of areas is what used to be historically volunteer departments now kind of migrating to combination departments. We're seeing combination departments migrating to career departments. And that's not a criticism of the fire service or the communities or their membership. It's just the changing needs of the service demands in those areas. So, where else can you sit in a class with 25 of your peers and have those discussions about what we're facing, not only nationally, but on a local level, but also have that resource afterwards where you can reach out to those 24 or 25 peers and say, hey, I'm working on this. Has anybody had that happen to you? Probably within 48 hours, you'll get at least 15 emails with attachments saying, yeah, we just did a strategic plan on a new fire station, or we're doing a request for a rescue squad, and here's our business case. So again, that's a very good networking tool, and also a safe place to have some discussions that are at times uncomfortable. Because, as chief officers, as leaders, we deal with very difficult issues. Those could be with our staff. Those could be with our rank and file. Those could be with a council member. That could be with a community member. But, those discussions, if we brought an NFA class to a local community, may not be as open if everybody in that class is from that region where everybody knows. But being on campus, that safe place where you can be in there with peers from across the country and have that discussion, whether you're from Hawaii or California with somebody from Alabama, because we're all fire service leaders and we all bring that life experience to that environment. So that's the added value of coming on campus and then taking opportunities of the classes we offer.
Yeah, I think you hit a couple nails directly on the head. The perspective that you get from your peers when you're on campus is, and the relationships you make. When you were talking about, all of those relationships, I looked down at my phone and I've got multiple notifications from year 2, year 3, and year 4 of EFO through GroupMe. So we're still talking, we're still working through community change, from a nationwide standpoint. And we continue to maintain those connections. I think one of the important things to note is that, going into as an EFO student going into the worldwide pandemic of COVID-19 and coming out, it was really interesting because the NFA didn't take the day off. They didn't stop moving. There was renovations being made. There were new roofs going on. The campus was being improved. Heck, the ice cream machine even has its own Twitter handle now. There's so much good stuff that happened, during that lull, that, coming to on campus now is still an amazing experience, if not better than, it was in 2019 going into the pandemic. So how do folks get, what's the best way to find out what the offerings are from the NFA? How do we word so more people can get involved?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And let me say that the NFA is actually in every state, right? So if you can't come to Emmitsburg, contact your state fire training director and find out when the 2-day classes are going to be offered in the state that you're in. I would also say if you're a department that wants to host one of the 2-day classes, let the state fire training director know that your department will love to host, right? So it's pretty easy. You find us a classroom, you host it, and the state will basically coordinate with us. So they'll pick the classes off the list. We'll contract the instructor to come deliver the class. So, the NFA is really right in your neighborhood. Now, having said that, I know that there are remote places that don't have the same access. So the good news is we do have a number of virtual opportunities as well. So the NFA is as far away as your keyboard, so you can log in and take an online class. We also have entered the Zoom arena. So there are about 9 classes we offer that are very Zoom friendly, if you will. And that's allowed people in remote areas that have never been to an NFA class to receive a 2-day professional development opportunity. Switching gears on the campus side, there's really 2 ways to get to us. One of those is you can Google National Fire Academy vacancies, and that will bring up a list of classes that have empty seats in them. So you won't get the full menu of our selections, but you'll see classes that we're looking to fill. The benefit to the person doing that is we'll get back to them within 72 hours if they've been accepted and get them a letter so they know that they're in that class. So that's a good way to kind of on a short notice get in. On the other end, we have 2 enrollment periods a year. We call them semesters, where we will say, this is our full menu of offerings. Please apply for the class that you're interested in. Please give us the dates. The key for our application is telling us that you meet the criteria for who should be in the classroom, right? So it doesn't matter that you're a battalion chief or a captain. We want to know why you're coming to the class and what you've done that meets those prerequisites. The other thing I'll share as part of this is, and we haven't talked about this, but the fire service looks much different today than it did 5 years ago. And we have a lot of people coming in what I would call special or technical roles that are not a sworn firefighter or a uniformed firefighter or fire officer. So community risk reduction is a great example. Departments across the country, both career and volunteer, are engaging people that have a passion for doing community outreach, right? Their focus through a fire agency is by addressing fire life safety issues. But, if you have a civilian non-sworn career volunteer, there's no reason they can't come to the NFA and take a community risk reduction class. And in fact, we encourage it. The same is true for youth fire center. The same is true for EMS, right? So those are areas that are not fire service specific. So they're available to your listeners as well to sign up. Or the chief might say, hey, I want you to sign up for this class because you're doing CRR. And we open up that door to others. So NFA does a lot. What we're discussing right now internally is moving away from the 2-semester model and going to a 4-quarter model. And the reason, what we hear from our stakeholders, it's really hard to predict what you're going to be doing in 6 months or 7 months. The pandemic, of course, has exacerbated that because of medical leave and long-term illnesses. But also, what we see is life changes, right? Position changes. Somebody, may not have the coverage that they thought they were going to have for staffing because somebody is retired. So we're looking to move to a quarterly enrollment system in 2024, which we think will be more beneficial to our stakeholders, which are all of your listeners, right? It's probably easier to know what you're doing next quarter than in the next half year. So those are just some options out there. The one thing we didn't mention, Joe, and I'll just cover this, we also have partnerships with more than 120 colleges, universities through a program we call FESHI, Fire and Emergency Services in Higher Education. So one of the things, and this started under Dr. O'Neill, was we really didn't have a national network between the U.S. Fire Administration National Fire Academy with community college and university fire and emergency services programs. So through that partnership now, we've created kind of a core curriculum. So whether it's a fire department in Arkansas or in Oregon or New Jersey, a community college at associate's level can embrace the national core curriculum. So they're teaching the same base courses across the country. And that really kind of creates a network for all of us. We did the same thing at the university level. So we have the National Professional Development Model that embraces not only training and education experience, but brings those academic partners together. With EFO, Executive Fire Officer, our staff right now is working with academic institutions that are not fire and EMS related, but they do have an amazing public management program. So we are entering into agreements with them where they will recognize the executive fire officer toward going towards your master's degree at a college university. So again, we're not the only game in town, right? we value the partnerships, and that's what we're all about. Our mission is to serve state, local, tribal, and territorial fire and rescue organizations. That's what we do. That fire emergency services, that FESHI partnership is added value, and that brings another element to our professional development loop. And then, of course, the classes that we offer and the states offer are also part of that. So a lot of opportunities for people to take advantage of. But again, we realize that, there's a lot more choices now than there were 5 years ago. The internet has changed all that. You can go online and take college programs. You can go online and take fire service training programs. And we're also in that space. But we are in a much better place now because way back there were only 6 or 7 when I started. I'm dating myself. I have a bachelor's degree in fire administration. It came through the U.S. Fire Administration degree at a distance program, where the U.S. Fire Administration partnered with 6 universities across the country. I went through Western Oregon University, and my bachelor's, I had folks from Alaska Fire Service, Idaho, and other Western states. So we were on campus for some classes, but at that time, we did classes virtually, i.e. you got a book in the mail, you read it, and you sent your papers in. So we're in a much better place now because of the internet and a lot more opportunities than ever. So it's pretty cool where things are going.
I love your energy, Eriks, and I think it's important for our listeners who download this podcast to know you were in Arkansas just within the last year, right? Visiting with chiefs in my neighborhood. You're in Georgia today, talking to the Georgia fire chiefs, I think, and so we're dealing with just a long line of NFAA superintendents who care. And it just always comes across so genuine, whether it was Dr. O'Neill, Tanya Hoover, or of course now you. It's just so refreshing as a fire chief to know that we have people who care about higher education, professional development, taking care of our women and men out there on the line at the national level. There's very few opportunities where you feel like the federal government really has your back. You all are an example where, as a fire chief, I feel like I know you're up there trying to make it better for us. I mean that as genuine as I can mean it. And so thank you for chatting with Joe and I today. We appreciate it very much.
No, very much appreciate the opportunity. And one of the things, and this is a key, right? Still today in 2023, there are people that don't know that we have a National Fire Academy, U.S. Fire Administration, right? So I think it's up to all of us to kind of keep getting the word out. So thank you so much for having me on the program, and thank you for your support, and thanks for your friendship.
Absolutely. So we've been chatting with Eriks Gabliks, who's the superintendent of the National Fire Academy. So our homework for fire chiefs for this second episode of 2023 is simple. Check out what the NFA is doing. Their website's usfa.fema.gov/NFA. Take a look at their class list. And even if you're super familiar with the offerings and the good work of the National Fire Academy, then your homework is to spread it to somebody else within your organization. That's just a resource that we need to get out there. For all of our listeners out there, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to us. If you like the content and what Joe and I are doing, please leave a rating. If you don't, you can leave that alone, and recommend the podcast to other fire chiefs in the business. We want to make sure that we're reaching our customers out there, good members of the Fire Chiefs Association. Thank you for joining us today. Be safe, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.